Welcome to our show. We have a very special guest today who knows more about Centerville, especially the area around Normandy Lane, than anyone around here. Nevin Elliott is our guest, but he's better known to most of the community and his friends as Ace Elliott. Ace, I'm very happy to have you here today.
Nice to be here.
Yeah. I want you to be discussing more today about Normandy Dairy Farm. Most people don't know anything about it. They see Normandy Church up there, and they see the big building built by Richard H. Grant, but they don't know what else was included in that farm, and that's what we want to talk about. I believe there is an overhead aerial view of the farm.
That is correct.
And if we could have that aerial view, why, we could start pointing out some of the things. This farm existed along Normandy Lane. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what we're seeing there, Ace?
Well, the farm is located about where 675 goes through at the present time. All of the buildings there were built at one time in 1927, with the exception of one, which was added later, which is in the top left-hand corner. The dairy barn, which is right in the center, the large barn, which is in the center, the four small buildings, which is now down in Normandy Park.
Oh, that's part of the Nature Center.
Yes. They were moved down there several years ago and became a part of the park. The milk processing plant is in the building just to the right of the main building there, the large building. And that's where we processed the milk and did all of the things that was bottling it and getting it ready to deliver.
Okay. Now, we have a shot of the gate. Now, early 1960s, I think the gate going into the dairy farm was still there. How big was this farm, Ace?
Well, the farm was 550 acres. That's the main entrance there. It was 550 acres, and in later years, Grant bought out Reynolds, who owned Reynolds & Reynolds Printing Lithographing Company, and expanded the farm to McEwen Road, which then increased the acreage to 750.
That's a big farm. It
yes.
Went from
Normandy Lane to McEwen Road.
Oh. Well,
and also, it was part of it was on the north side of AB Road.
Oh, the north side. What was up there across the street?
Well, it ran clear up to Durbin Road. From AB, well, just about where 675 crosses AB up to Durbin Road, one field back, and that's where the polo field was and all those sort of things.
A polo field.
Mm-hmm.
Who played polo?
I think Richard played the son.
Uh-huh.
We had one or two polo ponies at the farm. I've ridden them, but I never cared for them.
Now, I heard once that an airplane landed over there.
Yes, the airplane landed there and took off from there.
On the polo field?
In the polo field, yes.
And then there was a time when one landed in?
One landed in his yard that was in trouble and was trying to land in the swimming pool to break the fall, and they didn't do it, and it was both the pilots were killed.
Oh, I've never heard that story. Well, now here you brought us a picture of the house you lived in at the farm.
Yes.
When did your dad move there?
We moved there in 1930, and Dad retired from the farm in 1964. And moved to Centerville and later passed away a couple of years ago.
And what happened to this house?
It burnt.
Burnt in
the early 60s sometime.
Now, you brought a wonderful picture of the barns. I don't think people realize how really wonderful these barns were.
Well, they were maintained extremely well. Everything was painted, and there was no weeds growing around in the gravel lots or anything of that nature. That just wasn't possible. He'd just have a fit if he saw a weed growing.
It must have been a beautiful farm.
It
Can you
was.
describe what it was like?
Well, it was like most any other farm. We had horses and cows and hogs and sheep and chickens and turkeys and all of the livestock that goes with a farm.
Now, the buildings that were moved down to the nature center, those 4 buildings, what were they used for?
Those were hog buildings and sheep buildings.
Hog and sheep.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about the cows. What kind of cows did they have?
Well, everything that he had was registered stock, and the cows that we had were registered jerseys.
And that was your milking?
That was the milking cows. And of course, they carried a very high butterfat rate. And of course, the bottle of milk there would be half cream. And of course, that was before, after milk was homogenized, cream does not rise. It will rise on raw milk, but not on pasteurized milk.
Now, did he sell the milk?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I think
I delivered milk when I was just out of high school. We had a route in Oakwood and a route in Centerville. I run one day and one the next. 7 days a week.
Now, how old were you when you did this?
Well, let's see, about 1920, something like that.
Okay. This would be in the early 40s then?
It'd be in the early 40s, that's right.
Okay. Well, you brought wonderful pictures taken inside. These look like professional pictures.
Those were taken by a professional photographer that came from Reynolds.
Now, how did Mr. Grant get all of the other acreage?
Well, he bought several farmers out throughout the area there. We have one there on Mr. Lefevre, and I don't know, I think it was about 5 or 6 farms that he bought out.
All right, now this picture I like because it shows, tell us what I'm seeing.
Well, that's the bottling machine that bottled the milk into quart bottles there, as we have sitting on the table. And then they were put in cases and put into a walk-in freezer, or refrigerator, I should say. And then we would load them onto the milk truck, and the milk truck was incidentally insulated.
Oh, it was?
Oh, yes.
I know milk trucks when I was a girl weren't insulated, so you had very fancy milk trucks.
Well, the one that was...
The one you were in?
Yeah. Now that
This
one's
one?
all, this body here is all insulated.
All right. All right, now I have a picture here of Mr. Grant. There aren't too many pictures like this in such a casual stance. And that's your father?
My father and Mr. Grant in one of the milk trucks.
All right, tell us about Mr. Grant's interest in the milk truck, the milk and dairy
Well, he
business.
had a tremendous interest in the farm. Of course, he worked in Detroit and commuted every weekend. And he would come in on train, and he would come into the depot there in Dayton, and the chauffeur would pick him up and bring him out to the farm. And on Friday evening or late Friday afternoon, he'd spend about an hour, and then he would go home. And then on Saturday morning, it was always a conference between Dad and Mother and him.
Your dad and mother?
My dad and mother, yes. And they would discuss what they were going to do in the farm, and the cattle and the horses and all the livestock that was involved.
I'd say he had an interest.
Oh, he had a tremendous interest in the farm.
What did he have on that farm earlier? I heard there was something beside cows.
Well, the only thing he had was when we moved there in 1930. The farm was built in 1927. We moved there in 1930. And the only thing that was there was a team of horses and a team of mules and a couple of cows and a few chickens. Other than that, there was no livestock.
He didn't have horse? I thought he had Belgian horses?
Those came later. Those come in the 30s after we moved there. Him and Dad got interested in Belgian horses, raising Belgian horses, and also they did a service for the community. Farmers would bring their horses in, and they were served by the Belgians and had colts at a later date.
In other words, he was interested in the genetics
That's right.
of improving herds. That's quite a bit. Now, your wife told me that during 1937 that they had a terrible drought, and it affected the water supplies around.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the suggestion?
Well, he suggested that they put in a waterworks that run off of the old stone quarry, which was down off of East Franklin Street. It had been closed, and it formed a large lake. And at that time, they put in the Centerville Waterworks, and he was a large contributor to that waterworks, and also instrumental in seeing that everything worked out right. Had the proper engineers and what have you to work the
well,
waterworks.
now his farm is pretty far from the waterworks. Is that
it was all extended down to him.
Down Normandy Lane?
Down Normandy Lane, yes.
I know when I was talking to the nice young man from the fire department, he said it was very important when the village got water hydrants. They were very glad to have public water. Now, that lake is still there. It's across from the high school, isn't it?
That's right.
But it's private, a private club.
That's a private fishing club now, I think.
That was a big celebration for the community.
Yes.
Did you have any part in this?
That is Normandy Farms float, and we were advertising our cows and milk and what have you, and we dished out samples of milk along the way, and also shows our Belgian horses here.
Oh, the ones in front?
Mm-hmm.
Can we look at that again? There's a young lady on that.
The lady right here is Mr. Grant's granddaughter. She rode the float.
And the horses you mentioned were? Those
were Belgian horses. And right over here is, I had to get in the picture.
Yeah, I saw it. Well, now, big things happened. Now, Mr. Grant evidently sponsored some things around the community, and you talked about something special. I have a picture here. It shows a big bus, and it says Chevrolet. Now, I know you work for General Motors. What is this all about?
Well, see, Mr. Grant was Vice President and General Manager of Chevrolet Division for General Motors. This was a large traveling bus, and the back end of it back here opened up into a large stage. And they would speak from that. And they traveled around over the township and the area advertising the corn husking.
Corn husking.
And yeah. That was a picture at the corn husking there.
All right, now the whole community got involved with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I have a picture here of some people eating.
That was the food concession at the corn husking at Normandy Farms, and it was sponsored by the Centerville Methodist Church.
All right, so
the ladies there.
They fed everybody. Is that taking place at the farm?
That was taking place at the farm, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have another picture here. You wanted me to show this in particular.
That's a Centerville band. They played at the outing. And this girl here was in my class at school. This is a cousin of mine, and this girl here was a year behind me in school.
Well, they had very fancy uniforms. Centerville.
Oh yes,
had
they had
nice band.
They had a nice band.
Yeah, they're champions now, and they look like they were champions then. All right, so now we head to the field. Where did all these wagons come from? I see in this
picture.
Well,
the different farmers around the area provided the wagons, and then the contestants would get on the wagons, and they'd go down a row of corn and husk so many pounds, and then you have a picture of it showing them weighing it to establish who was the winner.
Okay, but here the people followed right out to the field.
Oh yes, they followed out and watched the husking.
Okay. Now, where was that other picture? Here. Oh, here they all are in front of, and I see that must be Mr. Grant standing in the background. This is where?
That is the south side of the dairy barn. There's a large lot there, and there was a ceremony going on there, and something pertaining to the corn husking. I don't know at this point what it was.
Okay, now you have a picture of Earl Miller here, and the Miller farm is still there right as you go.
It's right at the end of Normandy Lane on 725 across. They're building on it right now where that rug place is, and
right.
There's a place there, and then there's a shopping center and there's automobile agencies.
What's he doing in that picture?
He is firing the gun that kicked off the start of the corn husking.
Okay. And how did they make it a contest? What did they do?
Well, as you notice in the bags there is the corn that they had husked, and they weigh it, and then whoever had the most was the winner.
Was it timed, or did they give?
Yes, they had a certain amount of time to husk that within. I forget. I think it was 15 minutes or something like that. They
okay.
went.
That's Mr. Long there. All right, now here's the final picture of the corn husking, and here again we see Richard Grant.
I don't know what the man's name is with him there, but he was the winner of the corn husking contest.
Now, corn husking was a popular sport?
Well, that was before we had combines and corn shredders and all those sort of things that were power driven, and everything was done by hand. And that young fellow there was the winner of the corn husking contest.
I can't imagine husking things by hand.
Oh, yes. They husked large fields of corn by hand.
They wear gloves for that?
No.
Bare hand?
Bare hand.
All right, now I know the war came in 1941 and 2, and you had to go to the service.
Well, I left for the service in 1944 and was put in the Navy, and I did quite a bit of traveling in the Navy. I was served with the Armed Guard, which is a group of gunnery men attached to merchant marine ships. I went around the world. I've been across the equator several times. Been on a lot of islands. I've been on every continent.
Oh, a world traveler.
So I've seen a lot of the world.
All right. Now, when you first went in, your life's changed, or at least it changed for Celia Hines.
Well, we got married while I was in the service. We got married in 1944. And next year we'll celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary.
Well, good for you. I'm very pleased to hear it. All right, after you're married and you come back from the service, now your father is still at Normandy Dairy Farm, and Mr. Grant has bought out all the land that were the rentals over there on McEwen Road. And when you came back, where did you and Celia
wife and
live?
I started housekeeping in that old farmhouse there on McEwen Road, which is now torn down, but the barn still stands, and that's where Washington Township has, I don't know, some operation. I don't know what all they do back there.
Well, people can look and see from this picture how it used to look out here.
Well, you want to get over to get this in right here.
Okay, there's
the
barn.
barn.
All right, and then that's still there. That's a beautiful barn.
Yes, that's still there.
Can
And
we
Washington
see-
Township uses it.
Yeah, you can see it from McEwen Road. When we walked through the fields, when you went with historical hounds, we were doing some things, you remarked how shocked you were at the overgrowth of underbrush and trees, that it never would be that way when it was a farm, a dairy farm. How did you keep the fields so...
Well, we mowed them. We had sheep running on the farm and pastured it with cows also.
All right. You had one child when you lived there in that nice house along McEwen?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, who was your neighbor? That was a duplex, wasn't it?
Yes, well, it was a double, and Gordon Jump, who is now a TV star, was our neighbor, and he grew up and went to Centerville, graduated from Centerville, and of course he had a brother, and his mother and father lived there.
And they lived on the other side
of the house, yes.
Well, you know, famous people.
Oh, yes.
All right, this is one picture you like so well because it shows Holes Creek as it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Can we have a shot of this? This is the most pastoral scene. You see a cow. Tell us about how you enjoyed it.
Well, the falls were right in here, and of course on down you can see some of them here, and over here is a tree that we used to have picnics under when our kids were little. They would play in the creek, and there was, I think, 5 or 6 couple of us would meet there about every Sunday, and back up over in here it was all mowed so we could play softball and what have you. We had a great time every Sunday afternoon.
I'm really impressed with the fact of how the land is cleared right down to the creek. The creek really has a different look. Mm-hmm. Today you can scarcely see it because of the underbrush. Now, Mr. Grant bought, 7 farms to create?
Yes.
To create this, and you said one man he bought out was Mr. Lefevre.
That's correct.
What can you tell me about Mr. Lefevre? He's an interesting character.
Mr. Lefevre was very active in the early 1900s in establishing that automobile and then also the motorcycle.
All right, I have a picture of him here, and this you have 1900, 1905.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Lefevre must have been well known. He had.
Well, he was fairly well known. He associated with Boss Kettering, Colonel Deeds, men of that caliber, and the NCR, and some of Frigidaire employees, I think, were involved. And they built cars, and then, of course, he invented or was instrumental in inventing that new era motorcycle.
Okay.
Which I happen to own the motor to, which dates back to 1902.
All right, you brought this book in. It's a brochure advertising this motorcycle.
That's a copy of the original.
1909?
Mm-hmm.
And someday you're going to put it all together?
Well, I've got it all together. I've got to get it to run. I've got most of it made, but I don't have it running.
Well, you do some remarkable things, Ace. As you lived along Normandy Lane, what was the road like when you first moved out there?
Well, it was just more or less a bridle path. It was a gravel road. It was formerly called Brookwaller Road, and you did an interview with George Phillips,
yes,
who lived on Normandy Farm or Normandy Lane and worked at the farm for Dad some, and also was a friend of mine. He was a little older than I. Matter of fact, he took me to the first movie I ever went to. And
where did you go to a movie?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. I remember what we saw, Treasure Island. I remember that, but I don't remember where it was.
Think you had to go?
I think it was Miamisburg, if I'm not mistaken.
All right, I know a lot of people in this community went to Miamisburg on Saturdays and things. I had some other questions to ask you about. We went through the dedication of the waterworks. Can you tell us something about what you felt when you went back there and you were looking and everyone was trying to excavate around the old farm buildings that have been torn down and burned down? You had memories from your youth.
I never went back after I left. I never saw them tearing the buildings down or anything like that. I went down Normandy Lane a few times and saw them in a run-down condition, but that wasn't the way that I grew up and the way that
The way you remember.
way I remembered them.
Richard Grant evidently had some kind of effect on the community.
We had a great effect on them.
Tell us about the time that famous singer came.
Rudy Valley.
Rudy Valley.
He came to celebrate, I think, Thursday. That was Mr. Grant's daughter's coming out party or something that they called it at that time. And we, at that time, had dance floor, which we stored in a building on the back part of the farm, which was hauled over there and assembled in sections. I think the sections were about 6 by 12. Had hardwood floor on them. And of course, Rudy Valley brought his band in and played for this outing. And it was quite a social affair.
A lot of people today don't know who.
A lot of people was up and down Normandy Lane trying to get a glimpse of the place.
I'll bet. Because Rudy Valley was very famous.
Oh, yes.
That'd be like
Very
having
famous.
Elvis Presley.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was famous on radio and movies and stage.
But they had a lot of lawn parties like that where they used the dance floor and for various occasions.
You said, too, that some of his friends borrowed this dance floor.
Yes, they did. And it was transported to their place and set up and used for outings.
Who was that?
Well, I think Kettering had it once. Well, of course, Kettering, Deeds, some of those fellows was his very close friends. And they were all associated and became kind of famous at the same time. And they all became heads of companies and what have you.
After he got the Reynolds house, bought that, what was the house used for? Did someone
Well, that was used by his daughter and her husband. She married a Reynolds. Thurza married a Reynolds, and they lived there for several years, and then also they moved later down to Oakwood and lived in a very nice home down there. And Peggy, I think that was her daughter, lived there at one time too.
Right. That's that was the little girl on the float?
Yeah.
That have been?
Yeah, that was Peggy.
I know you can still see a sign on Alexbell where it says Skyview or
Skyview Homes, or Skyview Home or something like that. It still carries the same name, yes.
Yeah. Is it true that the front of that house faces out the back? And not the
It has quite a veranda on the back. I don't remember. I think, well, I don't know. You look out over a deep valley which goes down over Holes Creek and what have you. It's quite a view.
Well, now we've talked about horses, and I think it's horseback riding that got the Grants out here in the first place. Yeah. What happened to that their cottage that they had on Holes Creek?
Well, it was burnt down in the 60s. I don't know, some kids or somebody set it on fire, I reckon.
I think just the chimneys are left. I have two wonderful pictures here. I have one of your father on a 5-gate horse.
Yeah, that's General Grant. That horse was raised from a colt at the farm. We had the mother of the colt. And when you talk about a 5-gater, you're talking about walk, trot, canter, slope rack, and fast rack.
Well, I wouldn't want to close this without showing our Washington Township cowboy. And here he is. Now, you rode this horse, and what did you do?
Well, that was my job every night when I got home from school, to round up all the sheep and the cows and what have you, and bring them in for the evening, and they'd stay in the barns at night. The sheep especially were attacked by dogs and foxes and what have you back in the hills. Well, so we had to protect them.
I want to thank you for talking to us today, Ace. We really enjoyed it. And I want to thank our viewers for tuning us in. Thank you.